Hello, welcome to Friday's ESPN FC Live. Mark Donaldson alongside Janusz Mihalik. Later, we'll be joined by James Ollie to preview the Premier League games this weekend. Some good ones as well. But Janusz, how are you? And do you fancy starting with Lionel Messi?
Yeah, I mean, we seem to have been talking. I got to take care of my hair here. It's all over the shop.
Stop it. I don't even have any. And you throw that as a grenade in the first few seconds.
I was going to say that next, but since you have, well, hello, Messi.
I've got proper lighting. So, I mean, I know it's a miserable day here in Connecticut.
That is true. Let's get on to Leo Messi. Yeah, everybody wants to know about Leo Messi. Who doesn't?
Okay, so while we have a little think and have a go at each other for lacking hair or lacking light, Luis Miguel Echegaray has had a little bit of a chance to think about what the future holds for Lionel Messi. There's one game left for Inter Miami this season. He's hoping to play in that one, Lionel Messi. But there's all sorts of talk about potential loan moves. I tell you what, let's hear from Luis Miguel, see what he's going to say, and then we can react to that afterwards.
After shining once again with the Argentinian national team in World Cup qualifiers, Lionel Messi is back in the US, ready to wrap up his first season with Inter Miami. They didn't make the playoffs, but in a short span of time, he already gave this very young club and MLS something to celebrate after winning the League's Cup, Inter Miami's first ever trophy. So what's next for La Pulga, seeing as there's no more postseason for him with the club? Well, as we told you here on ESPN from the very beginning, and as Leo himself confirmed, there was never gonna be a loan deal to Europe or Barcelona. Though Barca's sporting director and former player Deco confirmed there will be a farewell match against the Blaugrana in the future. But as far as Messi's rest of the year is concerned, he'll continue to train with Inter Miami and prepare for November qualifiers, and then a well-deserved break in December, where he will go to Argentina with the family on vacation before returning to work again in January with Inter Miami. It will be the longest break this 36-year-old star has had in his career, at least since he was at Barcelona. This, my friends, is something to take note. Not going on loan should be celebrated by everybody, and it's a great message for the rest of the footballing world. Everybody needs a break, not just Messi. This constant hunger for action is destructive, and a super packed schedule is a cause for concern. The football calendar needs to be lighter for the sake of players' physical and mental well-being, as well as making sure the quality of each league doesn't suffer. Yes, I know MLS has a different schedule to Europe, and every case is different. But I think that we can all agree that overall, from the Premier League to La Liga, Serie A, the rest of Europe, international competitions, friendlies, new tournaments and qualifiers, players are just too much football. It's just too much. Everybody needs longer breaks. We don't always need action. Messi not going on loan and taking a longer time off is smart for him, but it's also a great message to the rest of the footballing globe. Less is more.
Now, he maybe thinks, Luis Miguel, that microphone was covering what looked like a Brazil shirt talking about an Argentine lesson, but let's move on from that. So the message there is quite simple. He deserves the rest. He'll get the rest. He's not going on loan to Barcelona or anywhere else. He's going to have a vacation with his family, Janusz, and hopefully from an Inter Miami perspective and for Lionel Messi after he plays for Argentina at the World Cup qualifiers in November, he'll come back refreshed. However, when you reach the age that he's at, 36, and everybody wants a piece of him, should we be looking at what he's done and applauding that? Or will there be those that think, oh, we could have had him for a few months when he's not playing in MLS? What do you think?
No, and again, I mean, that off season is going to be long. I think Luis didn't mention one thing. It may not be as long. First of all, we have to address the game this weekend, which is very important. And even though that's not your question, I think I'll go in there because even though Inter Miami are out of the playoffs, they will play Charlotte, who are vying for that. And I think sporting integrity is very, very important, because there's about 5 or 6 teams that are going to be fighting for what looks like one spot in the Eastern Conference. And I think we've seen Lionel Messi. He's healthy. I scored 2 wonderful goals against Peru. And this weekend on the decision day, I fully expect him to be part of that team. Now, how much he plays, we'll see. But I think the sporting integrity is very important. Charlotte probably will be okay if he didn't play. They just played him the other day. Was 2-2 without him. But I think the rest of the league should see him. Charlotte, as we know, has wonderful crowds. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of them bought tickets for that for him as well. But the sporting integrity is important. After that, before he goes to for qualifiers, I think Inter Miami is going away to China. I would imagine they want to capitalize on the fact that Lionel Messi is there, right? So I know there's a couple of games on the 5th, on the 8th, but I would imagine he's going to go there. And then, of course, he needs to stay fit for those games. So I think he'll continue to train. He should play this weekend for Inter Miami, in my opinion. When he goes to China, and then massive games, of course, I think against Uruguay at home, and then Brazil away. So before that vacation, he, in my opinion, he has and should have a full plate. In terms of going anywhere, he himself came out and said, look, I've never had that vacation. I'm going to have a chance to go home, see my family, and rest and properly prepare, have a great preseason for next year, when he's going to be expected for sure to win the playoffs to get into playoffs, if not win the whole league.
The bottom line is, with Major League Soccer, he just arrived too late to be able to have the impact required to get into Miami into the playoffs. They came close, but the bottom line is he's only scored 1 goal in Major League Soccer because he's been injured and various other things, and he scored 10 goals in the League's Cup, which Inter Miami did so well in. So for next season, is it a case of the expectation will be Inter Miami should win the Major League Soccer Championship, the title at the end of the playoffs, because they've got Lionel Messi? Or is that not the case?
Well, I mean, expectations will be from many fans because of what he's done so far. Yes, he hasn't scored those goals, but I think you said 11 goals total since in 11 games, and plus 8 assists. That's not insignificant. I mean, that's incredible numbers, no matter where you play and no matter what you think about Major League Soccer, right? I mean, Major League Soccer is not stopping him, as I've mentioned, to play great for Argentina and score these 2 wonderful goals against Peru as well. So he seems to be okay on that front. But yes, there's going to be that pressure, of course. There's going to be no excuses of coming very, very late. Tata Martino has already built a pretty decent team with not just him, but Busquets and Alba. There's others they're talking about. Obviously, he's brought 2 or 3 very young players that Tata Martino's been known to do that already in his time with Atlanta, just to mention somebody like Almiron, who's playing a significant role at Newcastle United as well. So I think that team is going to be looked at as one of the favorites. Are they going to be? Mark, you and I have been here for a long time, and the one thing you can expect from Major League Soccer, it's not to expect too much. Expect the unexpected, as we often say.
Luis Suarez, by the way, Janos, was linked this week with a move to Inter Miami. You and I have seen him in the latter stages of his career. He's still got the footballing brain. The pace is long gone. Is he an asset, or is he just another friend for Messi if he is to join Inter Miami?
I think both. Look, I think sometimes it helps because look at all those friends. We've had our doubts, haven't we, about Busquets? How are they going to take it? Not necessarily are they still good enough to play at their age, but, isn't going to be too much of a grind. Is their attitude is going to be such where they're going to take this seriously? And we've seen it, how seriously Messi, Busquets, and Alba have taken this. I think Luis Suarez, obviously his friendship is going to help. The ability to combine between the two is second to none. I don't think that's going to go away. Luis Suarez may not be doing his part defensively, although he's been known to be willing to do that. But I still think he's going to score. More importantly, Mark, I think, and I've said this before, but to our new viewers, Inter Miami is going to have to go after the big names because otherwise, that franchise is irrelevant to some degree. We all know it. I mean, we've seen it with Lionel Messi. I mean, Miami has been such a tough market for professional sports in general, right? But specifically for soccer. And I've been here 40 years, and there's been a team there in the past in Major League Soccer. It's so difficult. You remember one of his first games when he was substituted, people started leaving.
Yeah.
So I think even when Leo Messi is done playing with Inter Miami, they better have another star lined up, because that's the only way. I hope it's going to grow organically, that in time Inter Miami is going to be like anybody else, no matter who's on the pitch they're going to play. But Mark, I think getting those names in there is not going to hurt them. On the pitch, we'll see if that grind for Luis Suarez, it's not going to be easy for sure.
Mm-hmm. Just one final thing about the playoffs in Major League Soccer. There's no Messi, so the interest is certainly going to be there, of course, because it's the playoffs of Major League Soccer. But what's the TV audience going to be like on Apple? There's plenty of questions. Is it after the Lord Mayor's show? No Messi, no interest? There'll certainly be an interest, but will there be as much? As Janusz was saying, that's something that we have to see what's going to happen short term, and after Messi at Inter Miami, what's going to happen long term. Okay, time to move on to the Premier League. Before we bring in James Ollie, we'll be able to hear from James Ollie because he spent his morning buzzing around London, previewing Chelsea against Arsenal, and he's been at both press conferences, and there's been a bit of love from the two managers. Pochettino and Arteta have been waxing lyrical about each other. Let's listen in.
Obviously, it was my first professional opportunity in Paris, and we just arrived at the same time. We lived together in a hotel for 3 months. He was critical. He's been one of the most influential persons in my football career, first of all as a player. Without him, he took me under the arm like this, and he looked after me like a little child, a little brother, and it was big part of the success I had in Paris. It was because of him, because he really looked after me, gave me a lot of confidence, a lot of advice, and he's been a role model for me since that day. Not only when I was a player, but as a manager as well, because we have to make the decision to leave playing and start my coaching career. He had a big say on that, and I will be always grateful to what he's done for me.
Amazing memories, I think, is when you connect with a person like him, and we share the values and we share the passion of football. And yes, I can tell you, he's part of my family. From the day one that he arrived to Paris, we arrived together. We spent time together with our families also. First of all, in a few months in the hotel, and then we live very close. And it was an amazing history. And of course, for me, it's not surprised me what he's doing, because he was coach already when I was 17, when I know him. Already was a coach, and trust me, he was really, really good in all the judgment, in the how to see football, and it's not surprised me. He's great, still really young, and of course, improving day by day. He can be one of the greatest managers in the world.
You said you spoke to him when you finished playing. I just wondered what his advice to you was.
Don't go into coaching, it's too hard. That's the first thing. Is it clear? Yes. Okay, now what are the options are? I could tell, but I knew he was going to be a coach, and I follow him very closely, obviously, because as a player, he was already a leader. The way he understood the game, it was phenomenal, and I used to have him in my back, and he was constantly coaching me. And very proud of what he's done, and the way, especially the way he's done it through his coaching career.
And James Ollie, and that's probably as relaxed as I've seen Arteta and Pochettino. Nice little question, but it's probably the only time he's not listened to Pochettino's advice.
Yeah, it's not quite Wenger and Mourinho, is it? I'm used to doing these press conferences back in those days when those two were it didn't really take much to wind the other up about them. But no, this was the opposite end of the spectrum, and it's quite rare actually for Arteta to talk and eulogise about a manager aside from Pep Guardiola to quite the extent that he did today. So it's going to be a very different feeling on the touchline at Stamford Bridge. I don't think we're going to see one of those, another one of those shoves, Wenger shoving Mourinho on the touchline as we saw a few years ago. But their relationship goes back a long way. And also, of course, it's worth remembering that it was only a solitary season they had together at PSG, because Arteta was on loan there at the time. So it's not as if this was something that was forged over a long period during their playing days. But I do think another interesting aspect of this is that when Arteta retired in 2016, our understanding was that he was offered a job by Mauricio Pochettino, who of course was then at Tottenham. And one of those sliding doors moments, really, that Arteta could have made a different decision, could be on the coaching staff at Tottenham under Pochettino, and could have ended up managing Spurs and been in a very different part of North London to where he is now. But of course, Arteta chose instead to go to Manchester City and had 3 great years there and ended up being in charge at Arsenal. So, it's one of those where history could have been very different had he taken a different decision at the time.
Janusz, 11th against 2nd in the Saturday evening kickoff in England. There's 9 points separating the two clubs. How big is the gap between the two clubs as a whole right now?
Well, not as big as that. Obviously, a different time in terms of what Mikel Arteta has had a chance to do, right? I mean, remember, all of us were, sacking him just a couple of years ago when they finished 8th, I think 2 seasons in a row. So obviously, that progress that they often like to talk about and we dismiss should be taken seriously. But the difference is not as big. And I think we all knew it. It's just that Chelsea had such a low bar in terms of how they finished the season. The revolution that took place in the offseason, number of players and how young they were, the number of injuries that they've had, that we almost forgot about Chelsea and we chose to dismiss them to a degree. I think most of us knew that eventually it's going to click. The question was how quickly. I'm not going to sit here and say that it has already, but I wouldn't be shocked if to some degree Mikel Arteta is not afraid of this game more so than he was against Manchester City, because there it was always about Manchester City. If they were to lose, yes, I think he'd have to answer to that. But we've seen that movie before, where here Chelsea are starting to show I don't want camaraderie is maybe not the word, but it's something that came to my mind because it's a steady lineup with Raheem Sterling in the best form he's been in a long, long time. Cole Palmer coming in and doing well. Enzo Fernandez finally playing a little bit higher, and I think he's playing great. I watched him playing for Argentina as well, and it's just a matter of time. I think the price tag on him makes some people believe that, I don't know, he should be scoring 2 or 3 goals a game for us to say that he's played well. I think he's an excellent player and is going to continue to be fairly steady back four. So I just think that, this Chelsea team is capable of, I don't even know if I want to say causing a surprise, because it's Chelsea Football Club. And that eventually they're going to come good. To what degree, that's another question that you may ask later. But in terms of, would I be surprised if Chelsea beat Arsenal here? Not at all.
Okay, Brighton, Fulham and Burnley, the last 3 games. Successive wins, James, for Chelsea. Look, this is more difficult. I get that. It's Arsenal. But have Chelsea turned the corner?
I don't think we can say they've turned the corner. They've got a very difficult run of games coming up. It's not just Arsenal. They've got City. I think they've got Newcastle away. They've got Brighton again. They've got some big matches in the next few weeks, and it's probably only in the early part of December then we could start to say if they've had a positive run through those games that maybe they are turning the corner. Look, I think what is starting to happen, the word I'd probably use is chemistry. I think we are starting to see a little bit of chemistry between this team, and that was always going to take time, right? I mean, the sheer volume of turnover at the club in the last year since the Bowley Clear Lake takeover, well, it's unprecedented really in the Premier League to have this scale of turnover of players. Obviously, there have been multiple head coaches in that time. Now they've got another one in Pochettino, and he's only coming in the summer. It was quite an extensive tour of the US. I think if he'd had his way, he'd rather have disappeared up the Australian Alps for 2 weeks with no cameras and been able to work with his players there. But it was very high profile, traveling a lot around the States. And I think maybe what we're starting to see is the benefit of Chelsea not being in Europe, that he's having these clear weeks to be able to work with these players. And we're starting to develop those, see the development of those understandings on the pitch. And I would, as Janusz just said, I would single out Enzo Fernandez there. I think in amongst the sort of mess that Chelsea kind of was at the start of the season when they played Liverpool, I thought he was very good that day. And I think what's happened since is because Caicedo's come in, he obviously got himself up and running. It's freed Fernandes to play a little bit more in an advanced position. He was kind of playing as the holding midfielder last season. It's not really a position that suits him. I don't think it's his best role. But we're just starting to see a bit of alchemy between Fernandes, Caicedo and Conor Gallagher. And those two, in particular Fernandes and Gallagher, are really giving Chelsea some energy and some dynamism in the middle of the pitch. And Caicedo's that good, I think, that he gives the other two a bit of security to be able to go and build attacks. And I thought we saw that particularly in the Fulham game quite a lot. That that Fulham, for example, would go and press Caicedo, and Fernandes would be free, but he could come and drop deep, pick the ball up, and then try and build with those three through midfield. And that is a bit of a surprise, really, because the sort of word around in the summer was that Chelsea would accept 50 million for Conor Gallagher. West Ham made a couple of bids, didn't get to that valuation. I think the club were quite willing to let him go. They've obviously already also signed Romeo Lavia, and it'd be interesting to see when he's up to speed whether Lavia is the one that comes in and Gallagher drops out. Maybe that's the evolution going forward. But I think if we're talking about turning a corner, I think the only element of that maybe feels a bit ahead of schedule is that midfield, because, as I say, I think Conor Gallagher has surprised a few people with just how effective he's been alongside the other two, who of course cost big money, and you sort of almost expect them to come good eventually.
Yeah, Nish, I'm just going back to August 2018. The reason for that's the last time that Arsenal didn't win at Stamford Bridge, or certainly didn't lose at Stamford Bridge. Chelsea won that by 3-2. There's been a draw in there, but recent times, this fixture at Stamford Bridge favours Arsenal. What's your thoughts about this weekend on the Saturday tea time game in the UK? And you making Arsenal strong favourites, mild favourites, or not favourites at all?
I mean, look, stats are what you make of them, right? We were just talking about Arsenal and Manchester City, right? It was all Manchester City, and look what happened. So I don't know if I look into that. I think Arsenal would be favorites. I think, the momentum gain against Manchester City, I mean, it's hard to monetize that. It could give the boost to Arsenal. They understand, today's Chelsea, but, I think there's an expectation that they have to win. They understand it. I mean, I'd be saying the same thing if it was Sheffield United. It doesn't really matter. They're going to have to win everything. I mean, Manchester City, and the reason I think that is because I still believe that you're going to see Manchester City to go on those runs that we're so used to. And when you look at, Manchester City and who's beaten them and how, small margin for error, isn't it? In those Liverpool days where, they've lost, 2-3 games a season, or there's a 1 point in between. I think this is going to be another season like that. If Arsenal were to win the title, they're going to pretty much run the table. That's how crazy this is. But Arsenal are favorites. What I like about them is a win like Manchester City obviously goes a long way. But I also always ask, what's going to happen if this player's out or that player's out? And by now, look, I mean, Bukayo Saka's been out. Gabriel Jesus been in and out since, last season. Martinelli's been in and out. And that doesn't seem to cause friction or problems for Arsenal, even though at times I still think that maybe the depth of the squad is not that great. And perhaps it's much better than we all think. Certainly I do, and I'm buying into it. So, I'm not going to go throughout the whole team. But I think Arteta is learning. I also think going back to kind of the back four that got them there last season, some of it because of injuries, but some of it is tactical for sure. Not inverting a fullback in against Manchester City, kind of playing straight back four as they've done. There's a lot to like about Arsenal, but they know that this job is far from done.
Final question about this game to you, James. What threats did Chelsea pose Arsenal? And how did Chelsea stop the Arsenal threats?
Well, I think it's really interesting that Pep Guardiola, after the game where they lost at Arsenal, he talked about how good Arsenal were in midfield. And he put Bernardo Silva and Rico Lewis in the centre of the park to try and overload in that position, because he wanted to stop Arsenal playing. He felt that, particularly with Martin Odegaard, with Saka out, Odegaard was the one that really had a lot of the responsibility to build through midfield. And I think what they tried to do was flood that area so that Odegaard couldn't get on the ball enough. And to be fair, it worked for large periods. And I think Martinelli coming on at half-time really changed the game for Arsenal in terms of being able to get out, have a different avenue of attack. Look, I mean, we don't know if Saka's going to play. Speaking to people around the club, they seem to be quite confident that he's going to be involved, at least from the bench. I wouldn't be surprised if he started the game. And look, Yanis is right. I mean, I think it was huge for Arsenal to win a game the magnitude of Manchester City at home without Bukayo Saka, because they've been so reliant on him. He played, I think, 87 consecutive Premier League games. before missing that game against City. And, quite often when they've been a bit flat, it has been, for all the tactical innovation we talk about Arteta, sometimes it has been, let's just give it to Bukayo and hope he kind of creates something. And more often than not, he does, So I think it's huge for them to be able to have him back, but also know that they don't necessarily have to rush him back if he's not 100% ready, because they can win in a different way. And I think what Arsenal have done is maybe sacrifice a little bit of their creativity to try and be a bit more resilient. The numbers show they don't concede as many shots on target as last season. The creativity, as I say, has dropped a little bit in tandem with that. But I think they're going to be sort of a bit harder to break down, try and be a bit more compact. And that's going to be an issue for Chelsea. But of course, Chelsea, I mean, we talk about earlier turning the corner. I'm a bit loath. I'm always a bit loath to use XG as sort of the absolute gospel truth, but it has been an anomaly that Chelsea have underperformed their expected goals for quite a long time. They did it under Graham Potter, 7.46 in my mind. They should have scored 8 more goals than they did, which is a big differential in that context. They also were underperforming their XG quite a lot under Pochettino when they weren't winning games. So they have been creating chances. The big question is, can they do that against a team that has been much more defensively disciplined this season?
One of several. Sorry, Janusz.
Just to quickly add to that, because it's going to be interesting, because I think the question originally was what's going to how does Chelsea cope with that? Because in that last game, I really think that Arteta outcoached his master, by a country mile, because I didn't understand Pep Guardiola that he committed in the center of the midfield so much. Now I get it because Rodri was there, but I mean, he faced Arsenal without 2 of their key players. And he didn't take advantage of that, right? Because you think to yourself, well, no Saka and no Martinelli until he came in. You would have thought that that's where the concentration is going to be, and that's where Manchester City are going to go after them. And they didn't. They didn't take advantage of that at all, right? So here, I think Pochettino doesn't have to worry about that, because James just said it. That midfield looks very, very strong. Not just Enzo, but Caicedo is starting to come good. Made a lot of mistakes early on, but I mean, he's looking good, and Gallagher as well. But I think if you look at it, that now, assuming that Saka and Martinelli both start, which is a possibility, I think that's going to be an issue, right? I mean, this is what Pochettino has to think about, that, because at the end of the day, it's those 2 players in the wide areas that decide the game for Arsenal. Yeah. I think everybody believes in that, right? So Colwell on one side, well, left back, he's not, I don't think. You think you have an advantage there, maybe not. And I don't even know who's going to play on the right-hand side. There's some talk about Reece James.
Gusto's back from suspension. Reece James has picked up another injury. They've been playing Cucurella on the left-hand side with Colwell as a left centre-back alongside Thiago Silva. So there are 1 or 2 options for Chelsea. But again, as James is saying, we don't know. Yeah, we don't know if Saka is going to start. We don't know other team news. Martinelli, we'll find out, though. It's one of many good games this weekend in the Premier League. Another one. Now it's the early start, James, and Jurgen Klopp. Despite the fact it's the derby, of course, it's live on TV across the world. He's not happy. It's another early kickoff after an international break. Is it right that that's one of the main headlines this week in Jurgen Klopp's comments about feeling hard done by?
Well, look, I mean, it's a familiar refrain from him, isn't it? I always remember that there was a fascinating exchange between Jurgen Klopp and Des Kelly, who worked for BT Sport, now TNT Sports, after they played at Brighton, where he was trying to blame Des effectively in BT for the injuries that they were getting because they'd been picked again for a 12:30 kickoff. I mean, I think one important factor in this is obviously policing. The Merseyside police would have had their say on what's clearly a hostile fixture whenever it's hosted, and the Merseyside police, I think any police of any city derby like this would want it at 12:30 on a Saturday, because there's less drinking time, there's less chance for trouble. Everyone's just sort of waking up or getting involved in the day rather than having it. And I know these games have been held, but rather than having it, say, 8 o'clock on a Monday night or 4:30 on a Sunday or 5:30 on a Saturday, these games are much more of a risk from a policing point of view if they're held at that time. So that is certainly a factor. Look, I mean, maybe Jurgen Klopp's getting his excuses in early. He hates these international breaks because, of course, he, like all managers, he doesn't have time to work with his players anywhere as much as he wanted to. But there's not really anything to fear, I don't think, in this fixture for Liverpool. I mean, I was just looking at the numbers earlier, and they've lost one of the last 25 league meetings with Everton. And that was a couple of years ago at Anfield, but it was when the COVID restrictions were still in place. So the Anfield crowd was very, very limited. So it's obviously it'll be nothing like what it's going to be like tomorrow. So you would assume that Liverpool, well, they certainly start this game as favourites, and you would expect them to go on and win. One thing I would say, of course, is they do have to contend with the injury to Andy Robertson.
Yeah,
that is a blow for them. He's we all know about how important the fullbacks are in the way that they play, particularly this season. When you think about, I think he's called it a 3-box-3 formation that they now play rather than a 4-3-3, and the fullbacks are obviously very important to that. Trent coming in from one side and Robertson giving the width on the other. Whether Tsimikas can come in and do that and perform that role as well as Robertson has done for so long remains to be seen. An amazing thing I read earlier as well, that apparently I don't think Tsimikas has started 2 consecutive league games in his 3 years at Liverpool. So, we're about to find out a lot about how good he is, because Robertson and Trent Alexander-Arnold have been absolutely pivotal to the success that Jurgen Klopps had. So that is an unknown going into this weekend.
A couple of things, Janusz, to pick up from what James said. That win a couple of years ago for Everton was their first this century at Anfield. You have to go back to September 1999 for the last time they won across Stanley Park. And the second thing about the Greek Scouser, as the Liverpool fans affectionately call Tsimikas, Jurgen Klopp was asked about him this morning. He said, of course, he's in contention. He didn't give away whether or not he would start, but he did say he can't start every game. Joe Gomez could play on the left-hand side as well. I think it's Thursday they play next against Toulouse in the Europa League. Do you expect Tsimikas to get the majority of time at left-back until Andrew Robertson recovers from the shoulder surgery?
Well, this is his chance, isn't it? I've tried to buy into him as much as I possibly can, but I think over the years now that he's been there, I think when you bring a player like this, it's obviously a little bit of competition to keep Andy Robertson on his toes, but I just don't get a feeling that he's the sort of player that's going to unseat Robertson, and you kind of want that, right? I think he's just there to deputize. So I don't really know, but it's definitely his chance, because I mean, if Joe Gomez starts over him, that tells you everything about Tsimikas and what's going to happen to him in the near future. So he'll recognize this as a real opportunity. I did watch Greece against Holland. He played much, much higher, almost as a winger in that game. Didn't play left back as well, but the jury's out. But definitely, this is I don't want to say a gift to him, because you don't want to see anybody injured, but this is going to be probably the most important part of his career right now, because it seems that if he does play well, he's going to play there. So, but other than that, Liverpool, I mean, in a good position, massive game, not just because it's a Merseyside derby, but I don't think truly anybody thought that Liverpool may be within a shout of, I don't want to say a title, but there or thereabout. And it seems to me that all the players that they've brought, I think, are doing well, and this is going to be a massive opportunity, given the fact that, again, Manchester City have lost, and there's a fight on hands for everybody, because Spurs are not going to give this away. Their schedule is not all that bad. If you look at their schedule in the next 3 or 4 games, they may have some staying power. Arsenal, we've seen. So I think Liverpool knows that this game is even bigger than your normal Merseyside derby.
Last time we spoke with you a couple of minutes ago, James, you were talking about statistics and what you can do with them. You look at Everton and you see just 1 defeat and 3 wins in their last 4. You look at Liverpool and you see no wins in their last 2. Granted, there was a horrible decision by VAR against Spurs. So that's using the statistics to aid our narrative. The question is, Everton's form of late has picked up. How big an issue could they be for Liverpool?
Well, when we say their form's picked up, I mean they won at Brentford, who have got a lot of injuries at the moment, and obviously have got Ivan Toney out for a long time. They beat Villa in the League Cup. It's the League Cup. I think that always carries an asterisk. They lost at home to Luton. Luton's first Premier League win in ever. And then they beat Bournemouth 3-0 at home prior to the international break. So, I don't really feel there's loads there for Liverpool to be scared of.
I'm trying to give them some love, James. I'm trying to give them some love.
Well, that's understandable. You're a very loving, empathetic person. But I can't. I know this is an obvious thing to say. I suppose I just can't really see how they're going to get anything out of this. I don't see it. I don't see where the points are going to come from. You don't really see. What I'm really surprised about with Everton is that I thought when Sean Dyche went in there, you'd be thinking that they're going to win or lose games by the odd goal, right? This is going to be a kind of defensive resilience.
Yeah,
it's going to be organisation. It's going to be structure, and it's been kind of chaotic. If you look at a lot of their games, they've not. It's been a sort of both teams to score, and it's going to go one way or the other type frenzy in almost every game they've played. And you sort of feel as though Sean Dyche is still trying to implement exactly that kind of structure on this team. And had they started this season with that structure going down by the odd goal here or there, you'd think, they could go to Anfield. Early kickoff, Klopp already moaning about the scheduling of the game. Keep it tight for an hour, nick something off a set play. That was kind of the way you could see it going. But because they've not played like that, it's you think, well, if they open up, they're going to surely they'll get destroyed by Liverpool. You just think of the attacking players they've got, and I mean, I suppose the only thing to say is that Liverpool are very open themselves, and if Everton maybe feel like going toe to toe could be the way forward. We've talked about obviously Robertson being out, so there's a defensive vulnerability potentially down the left-hand side. I'm sure it's been covered many, many times about Alexander-Arnold defensively. They may think, look, the best form of defence is attack here. We could go and try and see if they are vulnerable. That midfield is very, very open in its current composition, Liverpool's, and they think, well, if they have got the ability to go and the bravery to go and try and play with a higher line and try and take the game to Liverpool, then maybe they could cause them some problems. But again, it comes back to the fact that they don't have that defensive stability. They don't have the confidence at the back to go and be able to play like that. And that is very un-Sean Dyche-like.
His biggest conundrum. I mean, I was going to say exactly the same. Defensive is an issue. I think going forward, they'll be fine. But if they open up with Salah and Luis or whoever's going to play as Jota, I think there's issues defensively. It's something that's unusual for Sean Dyche. So I think there's no balance, which, as you said, is unusual for Sean Dyche.
One more game I just want to quickly focus on, and it takes us into our final topic of the Ballon d'Or. We're going to hear from Pep Guardiola in a second. But if there's one game that's likely to finish 7-3 or 6-4, is it Man City Brighton this weekend, James?
Yeah, it might be. A lot of people talk about the similarities between those two sides. I thought it was interesting that Guardiola today at his press conference was talking about how De Zerbi's team actually plays completely differently to anyone. And they do their own thing, and they do it no matter where they are, home or away. And look, I mean, they've struggled a little bit to adapt to the sort of Sunday Thursday type scheduling, and obviously the increased focus, physical elements of playing in Europe. But they're still a real potent threat. And I thought, again, I mean, I know I've laboured a lot about midfield, and we talked about the other games this season, but City without De Bruyne. Obviously, Rodri returns this weekend, and that is huge for them when you particularly think about the way that Brighton tried to play through midfield. Rodri's going to be huge in trying to break that up. But without De Bruyne, they're not the same dynamic side that they are at their best, Man City. They've clearly not, hit top level yet. They're nothing like the team that was motoring through fixtures at the back end of last season on their way to the treble. And it might be a good time for Brighton to go up there and cause a problem. We know that they've got absolutely no fear of going to these places and playing their football. There are a lot of similarities between the way that Manchester City and Arsenal play. And I thought the way that Brighton went to Arsenal at the end of last season just played them off the park. I mean, but Arsenal have lost matches to teams last season. But Brighton, I've never seen them under Arteta in the last sort of 12, 18 months be just completely outplayed like they were by Brighton at the Emirates. So there's every confidence that they could go and cause City all kinds of problems, I think. And of course, Erling Haaland is in a devastatingly terrible goal-scoring drought at the moment. 2 Premier League games without a goal. Where is his next goal going to come from? I'm sure his head in pieces, over-analysing it.
He hasn't scored enough for Norway, has he? Because they're out. And Scotland have qualified with Spain. Janusz,
Here we go.
I had to get it in. By the way, it's not going to be 0-0 between Man City and Brighton, is it, Janusz? Can't be, surely.
No, again, I mean, it's one of those that, when you look at Brighton, surely they're capable of almost everything. But, are we going to see the good Brighton or the one?
Yeah, which one's going to show up? Exactly.
Villa or West Ham, some of those games come to mind. Obviously, at left back, there's a big issue without Tariq Lamptey and Estupinian. So I don't know if Solly March again is going to play there. That may be minor because they players like Adingra and Baleba. I remember like Baleba, where did he come from? Who is he? And I thought I actually know quite a bit about Premier League and try to pay attention to everybody. But that's what Brighton does, right? And when these players come in, they look the part. They understand the system. They know what they're supposed to do, and they actually stand out. They're not just filling in numbers because somebody is unavailable. That's the beauty of that system because they truly understand it. It's being implemented over and over and over again, and it doesn't change. But as you said, I think Rodri obviously coming back, that's a massive boost. And then the issue for me is still that midfield, even with Rodri back, because other than De Bruyne, something's missing. And to me is the placement of Bernardo Silva. I still like him to be a little bit higher, in particular because De Bruyne is not available. We all know in the biggest matches he's going to play on the right-hand side for the most part, like he did last year. But there's something missing there, and I don't know. Maybe John Stones, James, if you remember him from last season, every time he often played that inverted right back where he was coming in. But I kind of liked him when he was on next to Rodri as well, because then that passing quality of both players and maybe the ability of Rodri to kind of be able to go forward and not worry about what's happening in behind him. So that to me is an issue because I don't care how many goals he scored. I don't know how they play. To me, Alvarez doesn't fit in that role where he is right now. So that's something that's not right. I think when De Bruyne comes in, that's going to change. Unfortunately, maybe Alvarez pays the price for it, which he doesn't deserve. But I do think that he was your number 9. He would have been much better. But with Haaland, I don't know how that happens.
Yeah,
Okay.
it does feel as though Bernardo Silva in particular is kind of putting out fires for Pep Guardiola at the moment, and probably has been for a while. I mean, I remember again the game at Arsenal last season. He started at left back, and Saka absolutely rinsed him for 45 minutes, and he starts there. Then he switches to a more orthodox position. He plays in central midfield last weekend. I mean, he's a brilliant footballer, absolutely fantastically versatile footballer. But you do sort of think, as you said, Janusz, get him into his more natural attacking position and let him go and cause problems and create and fill that creative void that Kevin De Bruyne has obviously left through his injury.
James, thank you. You headed to the Bridge this weekend for Chelsea Arsenal?
I am. I'll be there.
Enjoy it. We will get your report over the weekend at ESPN FC. So thank you to James. We teased it with Pep Guardiola talking about a certain Erling Haaland and the Ballon d'Or, but he's suggesting that maybe him and Lionel Messi should both win the Ballon d'Or. Here's what he had to say.
If you had a vote, who would you vote for?
You're so funny. Always I said that the Ballon d'Or had to be two sections. One for Messi. Done. And after look for the other one. So Haaland should be win. Yes or yes. So we won the treble because scored 50, million goals. But of course Messi, if you tell me the worst season of Messi is the best for the rest of the players. So both deserve it.
What that journalist who asked the question was thinking when he got the immediate response, Janusz, from Pep Guardiola. Look, you kind of know what he's saying, and I know we're trying to get pushed towards should he not be backing his own man Haaland against Messi. But yeah, it's a difficult one. And was that the answer you expected from Pep?
Yes, I did. Because, I mean, we all know if we, in the voting, obviously we know who votes for whom and why that is not truly. Look, bottom line for me is that Messi's going to get it. I'm okay with the fact that he's going to get it because, winning the World Cup puts a bow on his incredible career, right? Because this is going to be the last time that Lionel Messi is going to win that probably in his career. I don't see it. It's not because he's in the United States, but partially it is, right? Because it doesn't carry the weight. No matter how many trophies next season he wins, if he wins MLS Cup and Shield and Cup and everything else, there's always going to be probably Erling Haaland winning again 2 or 3 or maybe 4 trophies with Manchester City. So this is a bow for him because it's something that's been missing. He's won everything there is to be won. Even Cristiano Ronaldo can't say that, right? So and it was something that was held against Lionel Messi for the longest time. The comparisons not with Ronaldo, but comparisons with another great, which is Diego Armando Maradona. So I think what he did in Qatar was spectacular. I was there. I saw it. Everybody saw it. But I think within you saw how important he was to that team and to the win. And I think that's the reason he's going to get it. But, you know, I could make a case for Erling Haaland just like Pep Guardiola did, because the type of trophies he's won and the number of goals he scored in all competitions, that in itself seems like statistically a better season than Lionel Messi, because, you know, we can count Lionel Messi's goals, but he certainly didn't have a great season with PSG last year. That is for sure.
Football politics, eh? Let's just leave it there. Remember ESPN FC every single day in the United States on ESPN Plus. Whichever game you might be going to this weekend or watching in whichever country, enjoy it. There's some really good ones. And just 1 week to go, remember, ahead of El Clasico. 3 times a week we do ESPN FC Live. That's it for today. Thank you to James Ollie. Thank you to Luis Miguel Echegaray. And thanks, as always, to Janusz Mihalik. Enjoy your football this weekend, boys and girls. Bye for now.